Nice. How are you doing? Good. So good to see you. I know. Yes, it is. Come on in. Welcome. We're just getting things set up. So nice to see you. I was so excited to see you apply that because we were talking about this new yeah. Make yourselves comfortable. We're getting set. We'll be starting in a couple of minutes.
Good morning, Maisa.
Hi, Anna Marie.
Can you hear me?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
You can't see me though. I'm going to
That's
turn
right.
the camera on. Hello.
Good morning.
So for some reason, oh, my connection is wonky. Okay. You're not on the big screen yet. Let me get the, hi everyone, welcome, come on in. The challenge is like setting up the computer so that it's high enough where the, where the camera will
It was
cut.
great. I felt really close. That's wonderful.
What's that?
It was wonderful. I felt really close to the class.
Oh, good. Okay, there you are. We're seeing you on the big screen now.
Oh boy. I'm going to put my slides so you can see if that works.
Okay.
Let me just call
For some reason, we're not hearing you over the
speakers.
Yeah. So let me see what I can do about that.
Yeah. That. Do you have, well.
I may have to use a different, use a VGA instead. Let me try that.
Well, it could be that Zoom, sometimes you have to tinker with Zoom and what speakers it's using. Do you?
Oh, really?
Are you able to see like on the bottom toolbar?
Uh-huh.
Next to the microphone, there's a little caret.
Okay.
Menu.
Oh, HDMI. That's what we need.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's try that.
Select the speaker that you like.
Oh, now we hear you.
Okay.
We hear and see you. This is great.
I'm not echoing, am I?
What's
No,
that?
I thought I heard an echo. There was.
You sound good to us. Is there an echo on your end? No? Okay. Okay. You sound good to us. We're, what time is it? We got about 5 minutes. I'm going to show you the folks who are here so far. This is our, say hi, everyone. Hi. So let's see. I'm going to, I know you can't see me currently. Can you still hear me? Anna Marie. Can you hear me? Let's try this. Can you hear me? No? I'm trying to see if you can hear me. Can you not hear me? No? Oh. That's not good. Okay. I'm going to test this. Okay. Yep. Okay. Okay. Let's try something. Hi, how are you? Good to see you, Anne. Yes, of course. Make yourself comfortable. Yeah, we're just trying to wrangle the technology here. So, yeah. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? There we go. How about now? Are you hearing me?
No. Can you still hear me? You don't hear me either. Good morning, everyone on the line.
Hello? Hello? Can you hear me? Are you hearing me? Hello? I think so. Okay.
Iris can hear us. I think it's the, oh, you can hear both people, Iris. Huh. What do I can't hear? Iris, you can hear me? Can you hear me now? I wonder why they stopped being able to be heard by me. I can hear you. I can hear you now. I can hear you now.
You can hear us.
Yes.
And you can see us?
Yes.
Wonderful. We can see you and we can hear you.
Yes.
This is fantastic.
Hanging up and
hi,
starting
welcome.
again.
We're passing out some handouts. If you would please make yourselves comfortable. We're just about set.
Perfect.
I'm going to give a brief introduction. Sure. And then I'll turn the camera around. I'm going to do my best. It's a handheld camera. I'm going to do my best to show the classroom so that you can see people clearly.
I appreciate it. I will.
But if I If
sorry.
I ever need to show a particular person, then I'll try to get closer to that person.
Yeah, I will ask questions and ask for people to talk with me at points. So that will be great.
Okay, great. Just adjusting some volume.
Sure. And could you remind me what time, like I know we're ending at 1/4 past the next hour, but
yes.
Would you like me to leave? I would love to leave some time for discussion and questions.
Sure.
Yeah?
10 minutes, something like that.
Great.
10, 15 minutes, whatever feels natural to you.
I'll aim for 15. It'll probably be 10.
Okay, sounds good. I know how that is. All right. Did everyone get a handout? 2 handouts, as a matter of fact? Wonderful. I am so delighted to see this full classroom full of people who are here to enjoy this workshop this morning. This is the first of a 2-part workshop that we're doing with Dr. Anna Marie Truster, who is joining us from Oakland, California this morning. She will be joining us in person next Wednesday. Anna Marie is an applied linguist and a trained sociolinguist at Georgetown University. She has done these particular workshops. She's done workshops at the University of Colorado for many, many years. Other places that you can mention to us, Anna Marie? I know you're getting ready to do one at Berkeley.
Sure. Last week I was at Indiana State. Earlier this semester, I did a series of these at Georgetown. South Dakota State University.
Fantastic. So you've been all over the country. All over, and bringing lessons to students, faculty, and staff at universities about how to leverage skills from the languages, from linguistics, and from social sciences and humanities generally in making that transition to the professional world. So we are delighted to have you with us. We do have a full room. I see we have people joining us virtually as well, which is wonderful. Hello to all of you. I'm going to turn the camera around now so that you can see our classroom, and I'll give the floor to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I am delighted to be with you all today, and going to be even more delighted to be with you there in person. But we thought we'd do this virtual session to start kind of planting some ideas and give them kind of a week to mature. And the idea is that when I'm there, you can come hear my workshop. Part 2 of this workshop will be, a further development. Don't feel like it would be repetitive to do both. They are designed to be done in 2 pieces. They're modular. And then I will also be available to do office hours. So you can come ask me specific questions. And I love to have these conversations in person, but then, also after I leave, I hope this is the beginning of a relationship, not the sum total. So stay in touch. I'll give you my contact information towards the end of these slides. But
Anna Marie,
yes.
One quick note. Is there any way for you to up your volume on your audio?
I can talk more into the microphone like this.
That would be great.
Is that better?
You.
Okay.
That's better. Yeah. Guys, there's some seats right up here.
Such a full house. That's wonderful. Congratulations to you all for coming. That's it's a great thing to see. This is a topic that sometimes people feel a little bit, anxious about. How many of you are maybe sitting with a little bit of trepidation to talk about next steps, careers? How are you guys feeling? Let me start by just taking your temperature. Anyone willing to share how they're feeling, what their thoughts are when I say the word, thinking about your career, your next steps?
Groggy? Is that the word?
Groggy.
I heard overwhelmed.
Yeah. Good. I mean, not good that you're overwhelmed, but good because I have ideas. And I suspected that might be a way that people might be feeling. So what I give, I think, is specifically good for dealing with overwhelm. So great. So to start out with, could I ask you all to pull out a notepad or however you like to write, take notes? It could be your laptop or, whatever you like to take notes on, and write down as I'm talking, as I'm beginning here, start making notes to yourself about skills that you like to use, interests that you have, and 2 dream jobs that you have. And I think it's important to say that you have more than one dream job. I don't think there is such a thing as the dream job. I think there are dream jobs. And knowing what you're aiming for is helpful. It's good to know what your destination is. It's good to know what you're aiming for, but it's also really great to be open to that while you're heading towards that dream job, some other opportunity might present itself, or something that you never even thought about might come about. So it's a great idea to have a destination, but also flexibility as you journey. You'll see in that handout that I shared with you all, I like the metaphor of a path, having a path and taking stock of the signs that are pointing you along the way. I think skills that you have and interests that you have, you can think about these in my metaphor of, journey. You can think about these as signs along the way. So think about these. These could be stuff that they're starting to emerge in, paper topics that you choose. Maybe these are volunteer opportunities that you have done. Maybe your friends tell you, like, you are so good at editing. You find that you spend a lot of time editing your friends' writing. Any questions? If I have you guys making this list, skills, interests, and dream jobs? We'll come to this in a little bit. I will ask you to share with a partner. Okay, you guys seem to be good. All right, so I'm going to dive in with my slides. So one of the things that I'm really an advocate for is starting with why. I work as a consultant. You'll hear me talk a little bit about that next week. But one of the things I often work with my colleagues and my partners to help them do is articulate why. Why does your work matter? So I want to start with why. I want to practice what I preach. So I assert that the world needs people who know about language. So I have reasons why I think the world needs people who know about language. But I'm actually also curious to know what you guys might think if you hear me say this. The world needs people who know about language. I say it's because we need people who know how to think in systems. First and foremost, learning language, learning linguistics. What you are learning to do is map systems on top of systems on top of systems. You're learning how to listen. You're learning how to carefully communicate. I think we learn how to be aware that communication is an achievement, right? It's not a for granted. I think that stance on communicative interaction is quite important, actually. We don't get, our world doesn't fall apart when we have a miscommunication. We're adaptable. We can strategize. We can recognize the role that we play in an interaction. These kinds of skills, I think, are precisely what the world needs. We have wicked problems in the world today. And I think the thing that we need more than any other thing are people who are adaptable, who can listen, who can think in multifaceted ways, who aren't afraid of ambiguity. Like when you first start studying language, I mean, the amount of input is overwhelming. A lot of people, when confronted with ambiguity, run in the other direction. We run forward. And I think these kinds of traits are so important and so valuable. But I want to know, do any of you have any thoughts if I say the world needs people who know a language?
Those of you who are in linguistic anthropology, sure you must have some ideas about this. Talking about the importance of language and culture. What are your thoughts about why the world might need people who know about language?
Or language and gender, perhaps? I heard that was a recent topic.
I'm inclined to agree. Focusing on the superior-morph hypothesis, I think understanding that language affects culture and thought, can affect how we interact with language itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we have learned to have a little bit of analytical distance on language. You hear people use the metaphor of, language as a window. We pay attention to, what's in that pane of glass? It may be, and it is, right? That function, shapes, form and function. There may be ways that stuff, an idea doesn't go perfectly from my head out into your head, and I can know there's 100% intersubjectivity, and we never will ever have any ambiguity or misunderstanding. Or no, we know that language is mediated, right? It's always going to have. There is always going to be ways that it is shaped and influenced and formed, and having a little bit of analytic distance on communication is tremendously useful, and it makes us more, I would say, more willing to accept communication as it is, not as we wish it could be. I love that. Yeah. How about language and gender? I know that we, maybe it's not so many people who are in that class, but I heard that one of the classes was talking about language and gender, and that, certainly might be something that the world might need to be thinking about these days. I don't know. Any thoughts?
It's a sleepy group this morning, Anne-Marie.
Yeah, I'm getting I'm getting a little feedback. So I will soldier on. Know that these kind of comments and thoughts are welcome at any time. So one thing that you might be expecting when you came to hear a workshop about, what can you do? Thinking about career, what's coming next? You might be expecting me to hand you a list. Here's the list of things that you can do. I'm here to say, I'm not going to give you a list. A list is also a bad idea. You don't want my list. You don't want to have the list of things that I think you should do. And you probably are already being handed lists. I suspect that some of you may be being told by members of your world what are the things that you should be doing. You probably are being asked this question. I know that sometimes parents are kind of interested in this question. What are you going to do with your degree? I purport to you, I would put forward, you should read that handout that I gave you as sort of a version of a map. That your map is going to look different from that of everybody else sitting around you in this room right now. Because your map is partly where you are being directed and led, and the signposts that are appearing for you are appearing for your interests. They're the things that are calling your attention. You know, I said to you, be paying attention, and ask your friends and your classmates right now to help you start paying attention. Ask your faculty to help start paying attention with you when you write a paper that particularly speaks to you. You found that, you know, doing one particular aspect of some study that you did really, you know, it sung, it spoke to you. Go to your faculty and start saying, you know, I'm really interested in this aspect of literature. You know what? How could I learn more? How could I dig deeper? Also, the map that was the career map from 20 years ago is certainly not the map that you're going to be operating with today. The map that I might give you today, the list, might be obsolete. It probably will be, even in 2 years when you all are out there navigating careers. I need to learn, you know, it's more the other way around. You all will tell us what the list is. So I love this quote from Howard Thurman. He's an activist who says, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do it, because what the world needs is more people who've come alive. But talk about an overwhelming proposition. It's a little bit, it's hard to know. It's hard to know how to start. So I have a perspective on story as a way to start. And I'm hoping that a room full of language and linguistic folks are maybe interested in the idea of story. I think it is a powerful tool. I hope you will, if not agree initially, allow me to convince you. So here's how I see it. On the left-hand side, your task is to find a challenge that speaks to you. Something that, you know, is you know, a wicked problem like we've been talking about, climate change, say, something out there in the world that is speaking to you, and you're finding it, you know, you're finding it expressing itself in the paper topics that you choose, in the clubs and activities that you're signing up for. There's probably many of them. For the purposes of career orienteering, as I like to call it, you know, for the purposes of making an opportunity such as a summer internship, for example, you pick one. You start with one. You might end up having 2 summer internships. That's fine. But starting with one is a very good place to start. So I'm going to be asking you in the next couple weeks, you know, in the next week, and we can talk about it next week, to start thinking about challenges that speak to you. One of the things that I'm going to ask you to think about is to find a job description. Somebody announcing, you know, we need help. A job description is really somebody saying, we have a challenge. There is this thing that we need somebody to help us with. We'll look at some job ads later on in this workshop, but be asking yourself. We'll be doing some activities to help you think about it too. But the way this really works is you find a challenge that is something that you want to give your precious time, effort, and energy to solving. Maybe it's miscommunication. Maybe it's, you know, you see education. You see ways that literacy could be being taught better. Think about the challenges that call your attention, the things that really in your bones. And sometimes these present themselves as frustrations, right? Don't look away when something kind of gets your goat. There might be something really in that for you. So you're looking for challenges that speak to you, and you're thinking about the skills that you could bring to that challenge. And then the next step is to learn how to convey to the person who is sitting with that challenge how it is that you can help them, partner with them, you know, collaborate with them to work on this challenge. And I see that mapping onto 3 aspects of story. So story listening, as you kind of go out there and start to become aware of the problems that are operating in the world. And we'll do a little bit of story listening now. And then adopting a practice of story finding. That's what we're going to do when we look at a job ad. We're going to think, what stories are there in this text, this job announcement? They sort of start to read like treasure maps for me. Little clues, little buried clues there that tell you, there's probably a larger conversation behind their choice to say, must be willing to work flexible hours. What's that about? So there's little stories to be found. And then what that gives you insight into are the stories that you can tell, the aspects of your skills and interests, as we're going to hear about in a minute, that are going to make you the person that would be great to bring your skills to solving that challenge. So that's our little compass. Like I say, I don't want to call it a map, right? It's more of a practice for navigating, for orienteering. The map is for you. So story listening, we're going to start thinking about story listening. One of the insights from, this was from a book that really changed the course of my life when I was a graduate student. It's called, So What Are You Going to Do With That? I don't know if anyone has come across this book. When I taught at Georgetown, I used to assign it to my students. And one day, one of the students was sitting in the library coffee shop reading, So What Are You Going to Do With That? And the author stopped by to say, I wrote that book. How are you enjoying it? And that blew her mind. But the insight from that book was that we can think about going to people as resources in the way that we, school trains us often to think about articles and books and, studies, and those are wonderful. And those are also created by people. We can go to people. I would encourage you, if you read an article that you particularly loved, I would encourage you to send an email to that author and tell them why you enjoyed it. Start thinking about going to people to ask them. So a practice that I hope that you will start instituting now and for the rest of your lives is a practice called informational interviewing. The idea that you find people who are doing things in the world that interest you, and you ask them to spend 15 minutes talking to you. You ask them, you start asking them for stories is what you do, and you start listening to them. And I would suggest that you start listening to them differently. Start story listening in a way that is a little bit more active, a little bit more agentive, a little bit more figuring out where their skills and interests overlap with your skills and interests. It's going to be different, right? But you're looking for that orange, that orange bit, the overlap, where this person's interest in French took them to work for the World Bank, and their commitment to education brought them to this particular initiative that's being rolled out in Francophone Africa. And then you realize, that this person's actually really interested in assessment, but I'm not so interested in that. I'm more interested in this component, right? This is where you start to figure out the happy medium, the bit that is the part that you share. And then you start to figure out, where else that might exist. So I advocate for listening for lots and lots and lots of stories. So this is a screenshot that I took a while ago when I had 2 subscribers. I'm sure I have way more subscribers now to my YouTube channel. But I'll at least have 20 after today. These are stories of linguists and people who use language to do interesting things. So I would love to hear, choose your own adventure. Pick one of these people and I will tell you the story of what they do. You can see under their picture, it says, localization or user experience research or market research. Some of these I didn't do such a good job with the titles. I need to edit. Catherine, for example.
I don't think we can see it. I can't read it. I can't read it well.
All right. Yeah, I will pick Serena Williams. She is not the tennis player. Serena Williams lives here in the Bay Area. She works in localization. Does anybody know what localization is? Have you heard of localization? I saw a nod from Teresa, but I don't need to put you on the spot, or would you tell us? Would you tell us what you know about localization?
Yes. Hi, by the way. Nice meeting you.
Nice meeting you.
We tell our student that it's a way of adapting products in particular, but also information to specific spaces. So it's not just a translation of words, but an adaptation of traits belonging to a product that need to be understood by a specific audience or by specific customers if we're talking about a commercial product.
Exactly. Wonderful. Yeah, and in tech here in the Bay Area, here in Silicon Valley, often you're looking at websites. Is a website sort of signaling to you, hey, I'm not from here. I love an example. I love TV. There was a television program I was watching recently that was made by Canadians, and they were trying to I don't know if they were trying to hide that fact, but I think they wanted you to think that maybe this television program could have taken place in the United States. But in one of the very earliest episodes, the neighbor shows up and brings Nanaimo bars to welcome to the neighborhood. Here's some Nanaimo bars. Do you all know what Nanaimo bars are? Is that a thing that you bring your neighbor when they arrive to the neighborhood? Nanaimo bars are Canadian, right? So you're watching this program and you're hopping along thinking, oh, great, just a regular bunch of Nanaimo bars, right? Like that would be an example where somebody who works in localization might say, hey, maybe they could bring cookies. If we're trying to say this is Main Street, USA. So how it, as we just heard, it's beyond a step beyond translation. Localization helps really draw on a knowledge of language and context, on culture. I think this is a great job for people who've studied language and culture and have these kinds of insights that for us start to become normal and natural over the course of studying and thinking for many years and being surrounded by other people who are curious about this and interested about this. It starts to become like breathing for us, but this is actually so important and valuable in a range of industries. You find localization in just about every context. So that's one story. As I say, I want you to be listening to these stories with an agentive stance, asking yourself, does that sound interesting to me? Do I want to know more? If not, no worries. There's plenty of other things to learn more about. I also organize mixers. Here's an example of a careers mixer that I organized at the Linguistics Society of America meeting that happened in Salt Lake City, Utah. I am organizing one in the Bay Area. I ask people on my website, I have a little packet where I talk about, the kinds of questions that you could get people chatting about. I think people should be having these all over the place. You all maybe want to have one. You invite, go out there and find some alum from your program. They will be delighted to come back. People love to tell stories about themselves. That's a secret. Maybe it's not such a secret. People love to tell the stories about what they're up to and what they're doing. Would love to be invited back. So bring some alum, have a little mixer so that people can learn from them, learn from their stories, learn about what they're up to. And then, another place that I share stories. These were the people featured in my book, Bringing Linguistics to Work. 5 stories that I found. I think I'm going to tell the story of Linda with the pugs down there, the 2 dogs, because she's a good story that exemplifies story finding. As I do this workshop like I'm doing with you right now, one of the things that I have, we play a game. We go into LinkedIn, which you might think of LinkedIn as, boring Facebook, but I think of LinkedIn as the world's largest database of information about work. It actually is. It's unprecedented, the amount of information that we have on LinkedIn about work. Never had it before. It's going to be interesting to see how we use it, but I did a workshop such as the one I'm doing right now, and I said, let's use LinkedIn and plug in 2 things that we couldn't imagine somebody could smoosh together as part of a career. And the answer that we got was linguistics and zoos, like animals. Linda Lombardi popped up, and turned out at that time I was living in Washington, D.C. She lived in Washington, D.C. I asked her, could we go get a coffee? This informational interview thing that I was telling you about. Most of the time, people, if they're available and if they can, they're happy to talk. So I went and talked to her. So this woman, Linda Lombardi, she was a professor at University of Maryland. She was a phonology professor. She found that on her sabbatical, she wanted to go work at the zoo. So she was spending increasingly more and more time working at a zoo. When she came back from her sabbatical, she found that, because of the flexibility that her job as a professor afforded her, she wanted to spend Tuesdays working at the zoo. And she finally started saying, like, I want to pay attention to this. Like, what is it that is calling my attention about the zoo? And over the course of things, she realized that she didn't necessarily want to work full-time at the zoo. It's very hard, actually, to get a job working full-time at a zoo. They have a lot of contingent labor, and she knew that wasn't the path that she wanted to take. But somehow she wanted to think about how she could combine her interests in animals and in language and, research. The training of an academic really trained her to be a really skillful researcher. And what she ended up doing was, a friend said something like, wow, you probably have a unique perspective on a zoo since you work there, a perspective on a zoo that people wouldn't normally get to see. I wonder if there's something in there. And that idea kind of sparked for Linda her first novel, which was a mystery set at a zoo after dark. And that was her first book. She's now she's left academia. She's become a full-time journalist. And now she specializes in researching cultures that surround animals. So this book, this photo that I have here is the photo from the cover of her most recent book, which is a book about pug people, the culture of people who own pugs. And, she said, when she spoke to me, she said that she found her way of doing research and writing about animals is very much informed by her background. Not only is she a very skilled researcher and a very good, careful writer because of the training, her rigorous training as an academic, but her training to think about language and culture teaches her to see aspects of culture and to understand aspects of culture that other people might not notice. She gave an example from working at the zoo. She noticed that people who work with reptiles have a very different way of referring to the animals that they work with. They'll use the Latin names of their animals, whereas zookeepers who work with mammals, they might even give their animal a nickname, like Steve. So, there are different cultures of practice, communities of practice that have to do with the cultures that surround the kind of animals that people work with. These are the kinds of things that, like, for her when she was working at the zoo were very useful aspects to notice. And then these are things that become quite compelling and can be a component of the way that she writes and shares, in her journalism and in her books. So story listening. I share this with you because it is the coolest business card I have ever seen in my life. Charlotte Lindy, her job is to chase stories around. She's retired from NASA, but she's still doing the same kind of work. She just is working now in a different kind of community. But when she worked at NASA, one of the things that she would do is she found a role for herself in a sector of the organization that was called knowledge management. And this designation, this world of work, is set up so that people are keeping track of how do we know things. As Charlotte likes to put it, how do institutions remember? So one thing that she noticed is that when a launch would retire, a batch of astronauts maybe had been to Mars, right? And then, moon probably. They were retiring and they never again would all be together, focused on one task. So she uniquely would see the benefit of collecting their stories and having their stories as a resource to the organization. Because what do stories contain? They contain problems and challenges and, the solutions that people innovated, the ideas that they came up with, it's pure insight and wisdom contained in stories. So Charlotte's job was to help NASA remember and help them understand what a precious resource they had in the stories that these astronauts told. So she would follow them around at work, figure out, context where she talks about this taxonomy of organizational occasions that are designed for remembering and occasions that get used for remembering. And she worked with NASA to kind of think about how could we design more occasions that get used for remembering, to sort of get the stories, capture the stories that might otherwise not get heard or told. And I love that set me on hearing her story really set me on a different course professionally. Knowing that, an organization like NASA would have people doing this kind of work led me to be curious about what other organizations might be interested in this kind of a task, in this kind of contribution. And then, I said to you that I don't have a list. I have a version of a list, and I will send this on to share with you. There's a link to this up on my website on Career Linguist. I worked for many years with students who were in a professionally oriented master's degree at Georgetown. We called it the Master's in Language and Communication. So after 6 years of working with students in career transition and being asked probably 100 times a day, what can you do with a degree? I did come up with a list just to have a shorthand. And I give this to you as a word to use with your friends and family. As an answer to the question, what are you going to do with your training? What are you going to do with your degree? You don't have to say you're definitely going to do any one of these, but you can say, I have I have a very bright future. I have, people who've studied what I study have gone to apply it in business, in research, in the worlds of innovation, government, healthcare communications, technology, education, and nonprofits. So in the stories that we've heard, NASA, right, is a government organization. Linda Lombardi worked at a zoo. Well, sometimes those are those could be thought about as an educational institution, research institution. Sometimes they're run as nonprofits. Sometimes they're run by the government. I say this just to show to you that these buckets are not mutually exclusive, but that this acronym can help you start to think about, think broadly, think flexibly, think with curiosity about the kinds of things that people might do with your degree. I would say take a list like this. If there's one or two things that sort of pique your curiosity, march on over to your career center and have a conversation with someone who works in career support to say, I really would love to know more about, how people from my program have gone on to work in healthcare communications. That really interests me. I think it's really important to be paying attention to the interaction that takes place between a doctor and a patient. Sometimes people are drawn to that work because they had a personal connection, or just can really see the supreme importance of communication going well in that context, and all the research that could inform that. That healthcare communications, by the way, is a world that is very aware of the training that we bring, and they often actually will recruit in a job announcement. I don't have a job announcement from healthcare communications today, but you can actually often see in these job ads that people asking for a training with morphology or phonology, syntax, semantics. They actually know that the rigorous training that you receive when you study languages actually is helpful for them when you start thinking about the pragmatics of a really multifaceted interaction, like any interaction, but the stakes are quite high in healthcare contexts. So this is another schematic. I love Venn diagrams, as you can see, that can kind of help you think about when you listen to a story of somebody's work, when you go do an informational interview. The kinds of things that you're listening for are, what are the things that kind of pulled them to this work? Was it more about the lifestyle implications? Was it more about the environment, the field, the tasks that they did? And as you're listening, you're also listening for that overlap from your own experience. What are your interests and your skills and your values? And how might they sort of tell you how you might be led differently, or to create an opportunity differently for yourself. So with that in mind, remember that I had you thinking about your skills, your interests, your dream jobs. I want you to get with a partner and look at, so this is an example of a partner that I did this workshop with one time. This was her list, and she shared with me what you're looking for are ways to combine these interests or patterns that you see in these interests. She shared with me, and then I turned it into a slide, her passion for television and her interest in representing particular viewpoints, and her dream job of being an educator, or even, a consultant maybe on film and television, leads her to do things like she tweets at her favorite television programs to tell them that, a show set in 1967 should not be using such linguistic features as quotative, like as widely as they do, and commands them to hire linguists. So sit with your partner, look at your skills, your interests, your dream jobs, have them help you see
patterns, combinations, connections, applications. Think very curiously, right? We are systems thinkers. So let's play. Let's do pattern finding and some systems thinking and see what you might see. And I would love to ask for 1 or 2 examples. So if you hear yourself kind of saying, I never thought about that before, consider sharing it with the group. So I'll give you 5 minutes to workshop with a partner.
All right, folks, I think we're going to come back together for a little bit of discussion. You have some ideas about patterns and connections that you've seen in the lists that you've made, I hope. Ozzy, can I call on you to start us off and maybe share?
So the two skills that I have are thinking and problem solving. My interest is forensic anthropology and medical anthropology. My dream job is to work at the Smithsonian, and number two is to be a forensic expert.
Great.
Very cool. Does anyone in that room know anyone who does that? Or has done that?
Archaeologists or Smithsonian Museum specialists? Laura, do you know? I saw you almost raise your hand. Well, I know some forensic anthropologists, but they live in Arizona.
Well, I'm sure they could do a virtual informational interview. I happen to know several people who have worked at the Smithsonian. So if somebody wanted to connect with me on LinkedIn, what they could do is send a little text that would say something like, "Dear Anna Marie, I heard you give this workshop, and when I did my own reflection, I realized that working at Smithsonian would be a dream job. I see in your network that you are connected to, so-and-so who worked at the Smithsonian. And I think their job sounds interesting because," and then, "hey, would you connect me with that person? And I will forward your LinkedIn message on to that person. And you two can talk about." So they hire every summer. They hire researchers. They hire interns. And I had many students actually who worked with them over the course of the years that I was working at Georgetown. So do it. It's great work.
Would someone else like to share their list? Natalie? Or share connections and patterns that you all identified?
Well, Laura and I actually had a similar one. We were kind of just talking about healthcare in general, and I want to go into speech pathology. So definitely human skills kids, definitely want people to work with kids, and I'm bilingual, so I'm definitely interested in language acquisition and stuff like that.
Did you hear that, Anne Marie?
Yeah, I heard most of it. I would be curious to know, did anyone in the room hear something that made them think like, I know a good resource for you, or I think I know somebody who might be interested in that? Did I see some hands? I think I see some hands.
Anyone talk to a partner that you heard that they were interested in a particular thing and you said, "Oh my gosh, I know someone who does that"?
Well, going forward, if not now, you will start to see more and more of these kinds of connections. Thank you all for sharing. Those are great. Again, I will say I know a lot of people who work in, it was healthcare communications, right? Medicine? Yeah?
That last one?
Yes, health communication, speech pathology.
Uh-huh. Oh, yes, definitely. Oh, yeah. Again, use that database that is LinkedIn. Find, those are great keywords, right? And LinkedIn lets you use it's a database, right? So you can use a bunch of keywords like speech pathology, anthropology. Get all of those keywords in there, and you'll start finding the people in the organizations and the events and the groups and the articles that can start helping you navigate. So one thing that I just want to say here now, leave this room here and now thinking of yourselves as
resources for one another, you could be the person that helps create the connection to, you probably know people who are involved in, you may not know it yet, but you're going to start paying attention now. Alum that you have heard about, who've gone on to do interesting things, your cousin, your uncle, your, friends of friends. Next week, we're going to play with the idea of asking for things. And when I say asking for things, I'm talking about this tiny little act. Like, I'm interested in healthcare communication. Does anybody know anybody who is working in that space? Or, I don't know, maybe you could ask a professor to help you think about a paper that you might, a topic that you might work on, something that might be relevant and interesting, a topic. Metaphor, for example. Metaphor is a thing that shows up in a lot of these people who do research in healthcare communications. It sort of seems like it's the kind of thing that we see and understand, and it's very natural to us to think about how people have metaphorical ways that they understand a disease, for example. But you can look on a discussion board about people who are living with cancer, for example, and pay attention to the metaphors that people use to talk about their disease and their relationship to their disease. And it actually is tremendously, we talked at the beginning of this workshop about how language shapes culture and identity and agency, and just knowing the metaphorical representations that people use to think about how they are living with a particular pathology, it actually will inform how they live, how they do things, how they, and doctors may have an interest in reframing and getting people to see different kinds of relationships. So these are the kind of things I want you to start thinking about, what you're curious about, and start practicing. And we'll do a little bit more with it next time, how you might formulate that into an ask, something very specific that you would like to know more about. And in turn, the kinds of things that people might ask you about. What are the kinds of things that you have been doing research papers about, say, like articles that you've read, or databases that are particularly helpful, features of language or culture, literature. It could be anything. So you will continue to think about the ask. For now, I want to do one more quick activity to think about story finding. Do we have the job ads handout?
Yes.
All right. Let's dig in with that. It's another source of data. There are 3 different jobs here. I want you to get with the same partner. That's fine. And use your pattern finding again, but this time we're looking for stories, like things that we might maybe want to ask someone more about in these job ads. So pick a job ad and then just start digging in. I'm going to give you again like 5 minutes. And I want you to come back to the group with a question, a word that you saw that kind of struck you, or something that seemed to be a way of talking about a skill that you're curious, what is this, or do I have this? Be researchers in these data. This is a different kind of data maybe than what you typically look at, but let's dig in with these data, and let's see if we can come up with 1 or 2 concrete asks. So 5 minutes again?
That sounds about right.
Perfect.
All right, folks, it sounds like your discussions are winding down a little bit. So you had a chance to look at probably the first job ad, if not all three of them. Excuse me. So we'd like to hear a little bit from you about the stories, so to speak, that you see embedded in this job ad. What's the story of what they're looking for? What's the story of the challenges they might be facing and why they need somebody to face those challenges? What's the story of the skill sets of the person who might be ideal for this position? I'm going to call on somebody to get us started. if
Sure, that's
okay.
great. Thanks.
Justin, would you mind getting us started? And if you can like speak up as loud as you possibly can.
So the first job was the analytical linguist, and it was like what I kind of got out of it is they're looking for someone to help work with their AI development, someone who knows language. It sounds like, when I understood, it sounds like they want to give the AI like a better understanding of language, like how to speak like a person in a way. Like people have, like we don't speak perfectly, we don't speak like exactly. So I guess they're looking for someone to look at data, kind of put in how to speak.
Okay. So they need a human to make the AI a little more human. Okay, good. Anna Marie, were you able to hear some of that?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anything in that job ad sort of, beg a question or I'd like to know, I want to know more about what they mean when they say, or I'm curious to think whether, I might have something to offer them that would, any of those little specific, lexemes that call attention.
I think Ben has an idea here.
Cool.
Like reading through it, I was just sort of wondering how much actual coding experience a person would need.
Mm-hmm.
If that was necessary at all.
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. And that tells me. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was also wondering, it says that intent modeling ownership for methods used to design and optimize. Is it complete ownership of whatever I come up with if I happen to get the job, or is it you determine that whether I get ownership on it or not?
Oh my gosh, these are wonderful questions. Yeah. So these are asks. These are concrete things that you can bring to. Those kind of questions would be great to bring to a job interview, but also before that, to people who you can find who are in this world. These are questions to bring to just general research about the sector too. There's probably information on this organization's website about the way that they understand, the intellectual property, the IP. To that earlier question about, or the first part of that question about who owns the insights. Did anybody see a job that made them kind of think, maybe I might be interested in throwing my hat in that ring?
See anything that sparked your curiosity?
And we're into the Q&A section now, so it can be a question about one of those jobs, or it could be a question about anything we've talked about today so far, or something that this made you think about. Any questions?
Anna Marie, I think I have a follow-up question for you.
Great.
You were asking us earlier to think about patterns and connections between, say, interests, skills, and possible positions out there.
Yeah.
So when you say patterns and connections, can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Oh, so many answers.
Maybe in the briefest possible way, since we're winding down.
So I guess a practice that maybe I would have people do when they leave the room today, find 5 minutes to sit down and kind of journal. I would say if there is, a word in here that sort of sparked a question, a curiosity, or a memory, say, like, I remember I did that that research project where I was investigating that, that metaphor. I would sit down and have you do sort of a mind map of that, where you're starting to remember all the things that happened. So say it's that specific memory, a research paper that you wrote about a metaphor in a particular piece of literature, say. And start thinking about all the sources that you consulted, all of the ideas that you had. And you call this, a semantic map or a mind map, but just like chasing the associations, and then the associations to that association, and then the associations that those associations. So you're just sort of creatively, collaboratively retrieving. I think of these as data. These are points that inform you're looking for signs that are pointing you towards stuff that you are interested in doing, right? So yeah, if that practice, I think it's a practice that makes sense when you start to do it. But one of the things that it can do for you is, that sets me up nicely for my last slide. It sets you up to have stories. One of the things that I would want you to do going forward now is never have a resume that exists that is not in conversation with a particular job ad, right? So your resume, you will selectively present and curate examples from your life, your research, your experience that speak specifically to the job ad. So, any coding experience that you have, any, you saw that they're looking for stuff about cognitive, any courses that you had in cognitive science. This should be a conversation. A resume only exists as a conversation to a job ad. All of the data that are contained in a resume live somewhere else. So,
Marie, we have a quick question.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. We have a quick question. Ozzy, go ahead.
Do you change your resume depending on the job description every time?
Yeah. And in fact, I would encourage you to think about all of the stuff that is contained in a resume, those ideas. I think of those as stories. Those get stored in like a story bank. So you're generating ideas for your story bank all the time, including doing activities like that mind mapping thing that I was talking about. And then you pull from those to create a resume, right? So any time that you are looking at a resume, I would want you to think of it as the resume that belongs to this particular job application. They are dynamic documents.
We have a quick follow-up.
And the skills varies depending on whatever areas of responsibility.
Exactly. So you don't have to think about a resume as a complete and total chronological history of, this is me starting from the first thing that I ever did. In fact, I would say look at the order of the skills that are listed in a job ad and think about whether you can present first any experience from, operating within chronology. You don't have to actually. You can do a skills-based resume. This is a question to bring to your careers office. But even within, the chronology of the most recent job that you have, or the current, volunteer experience that you're doing, or the current research that you're doing, or part of the work that you're doing with your professors, can you order the skills that you are cultivating in an ordering that matches the priorities of the job? So what they ask for first, show them first, if you can.
That's a great point for us to end on. We're at the end of our hour here. Thank
Perfect.
you all for being here. Thank you, Anna Marie. We'll see you next week in person.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Teresa.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Anne-Marie.
You were wonderful.
Yeah, I really like the last comment about the resume as a story. So much of what we communicate in these days is standardized, and it's important to actually retailer it and really create an exchange, right? That speaks to the people who are involved in the dialogue.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
It's an interaction.
I will miss your visit. Unfortunately, I'll be traveling myself to present my book.
Oh, wow.
And so I will be in Ohio. But this for me has been a great introduction to this approach. And as you can imagine, students are coming to us more and more.
Yeah.
For advice, and so it's a great way to allow them to really reset their minds about this, rather than thinking about what's the job out there I can send my already packaged resume
Right.
to. It couldn't be more different than this.
Right. And I would hope that they would come away with a sense that they really have done so much of the work already. That
Yes.
This is not something new. This is
Right.
absolutely of a kind with the thinking and the research, and they've got all the skills to do it.
Absolutely. So if you have something to share about people who are interested in translating specifically, that would be great, because I realized that when students are interested in that, there isn't really a straightforward answer, as you know. It can mean so many different things. So some of them may need a little bit of more training, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So it could be a combination of applying for, I don't know, maybe some classes, and yet at the same time taking an internship. So anything that could work as they transition between the university and the workplace. It would allow us to give them a couple of examples, I think, because, as you know, even less than other jobs, those.
Oh, the internet is freezing up a little bit.
Obviously, big translation centers that constantly, but sometimes our students have more specific needs.
Yeah.
Did you hear me?
I heard some of it. The internet sort of ate a little bit, but I think I get what you're saying. So I do a thing on my website where I look at worlds of work. I think translation should be a world of work I look at next. Because, you've given me some specific ideas, and I think there's people who have had experiences who I would want to put in there as a resource. So I will pull together a world of work on translation.
Oh, fantastic. And we can stay in touch, because, we may do something a little bit more focused on this as we move on. And we're also discovering that many people who work in translation work part-time. So for us, the question is also, how much can we offer students a part-time path?
Yeah.
It could be particularly attractive. I liked how you included lifestyle, for example. Some people may want that, but what about the more typical 22-year-old who's ready to dive right into a job? And what does it mean to think about perhaps two things to be combined, rather than combining skills into one job?
Yeah.
This is what I'm finding in this specific field.
I see
which is very different from teaching, for example, where obviously it's a much more straightforward line, even though there's much more complexity in there too, compared to the past. So just ideas that came out while I was listening. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll be in touch.
Be in
Ciao.
touch. Enjoy your trip.
Thank you. You too.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Bye, Anna Marie. Sorry, I was talking with some folks here in the classroom. Thank you.
Oh, wonderful.
And I'll touch base with you either later on today or, before you come here in person.
Great.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you. You were wonderful today. Thank you for your help.
You bet. I think we can work on the coordination a little bit, but it's a little bit awkward with the virtual thing. But I think it worked great.
I think it worked wonderful. It is awkward, and I think we made it less so.
Great. Okay, I'll talk to you
happy.
soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.